Kong stepped over a mountain of broken metal and stared straight at me like he already knew my name. I did not run. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to drop the cracked war tablet, back away, make myself smaller, disappear into the black stone ruins behind me. But I had spent my whole life chasing ghosts buried under lies, and now the largest living thing I had ever seen was standing less than 50 feet away, breathing through flared nostrils, blood streaked across his knuckles from a battle that had just ended. Around us, the forgotten battlefield was still dying. Pieces of biomechanical Titan Guardians burned in the dust. Their ribbed armor glowed red along split seams. One headless construct twitched on the ground, its clawed forelimbs carving trenches through ancient mosaic floors before finally going still. The walls surrounding us rose in broken rings, carved with images I had only seen in fragments passed down through my family line. Titans kneeling, cities burning, a crown-shaped symbol over a world split open from below. My world. My blood had carried this war like a curse, and Kong had just torn through its last active weapons to reach me. I tightened my grip on the tablet. It was about 18 inches long, forged from some dull black alloy that felt warmer than it should have. The moment I touched it, the entire chamber had awakened. The Guardians had risen from their alcoves, not to attack me first, to reach the tablet. That was the part one still did not understand. Kong did. He lowered his head and looked past me, not at me. That was when I heard it. A sharp metallic whine came from the shattered terrace above the arena. Then another. Then 6 red targeting beams cut through the smoke and landed across my chest, my throat, the tablet in my hands. The recovery expedition had found us. I spun toward the ledge and saw them emerging through the ruined gate in matte gray climbing armor, rifles up, masks glowing with blue internal light. 6 of them. Not explorers. Not rescuers. Clean movements. Controlled spacing. They had come for relics, and now they had found the one thing in Hollow Earth that could wake a dead war. "Secure the survivor," one of them shouted. "Do not let her damage the artifact." The first shot hit the stone beside my head hard enough to spray shrapnel across my cheek. I stumbled backward. Kong moved before I could breathe. He slammed one hand into the ground between me and the ledge, and the entire floor jumped. Ancient stone burst upward in a wave. The next volley ricocheted off broken slabs and shattered columns. Then Kong ripped a fallen Guardian's torso from the rubble and swung it like a shield across my side, just as a heavier round screamed down from above and exploded against the machine shell. He was not warning me. He was protecting me. That changed everything. I ran where his movement opened space, diving behind the bent spine of a destroyed construct. My palms hit grease, ash, and old blood. The tablet nearly slipped from my hands. Above me, boots hammered stone as the expedition split into 2 teams, trying to flank him and cut me off from the lower passage. They were not hunting Kong. They were hunting me. No, worse. They were hunting what I proved. Kong roared, and I felt it in my ribs. He charged the terrace wall instead of the soldiers themselves, smashing both fists into a load-bearing arch. The ledge buckled under 3 of them at once. They dropped screaming into the lower ruins, weapons spinning away into darkness. Not dead, but out of the fight. The other 3 adapted fast. One fired a cable anchor into the tablet. The hook bit into its edge and yanked me forward so violently my shoulder popped. I crashed onto the mosaic floor and lost my grip for half a second. That half second nearly ended history. A gloved hand reached the tablet first. The thief never got to close a hand around the tablet. A shadow crossed the shattered ceiling of the ruin, huge enough to swallow the cold blue light pouring down from the hollow earth sky. Dust lifted off the mosaic floor. Broken pillars groaned. Then Kong came down like a falling mountain. His fist hit between us. Stone exploded. The shock wave threw the intruder backward so hard his cable line snapped, and the ancient tablet skidded across the floor, spinning toward a cracked stairwell. I rolled after it on instinct, shoulder burning, fingers numb, and trapped it against my chest a split second before it could slide into the darkness below. The 3 remaining intruders did not run. That was the first sign they had come for more than relics. One barked an order. Another dropped to a knee and aimed not at me, but at Kong. Not bullets. A metal canister. It burst in midair and spread a web of orange static that wrapped across Kong's chest and left arm. The light did not pierce him. It clung to him. It mapped him. Kong ripped the net away with a roar that shook dust from the ceiling, but the damage was already done. The third intruder held up a wrist display, and symbols ignited across its screen. They had scanned him, not hunted him, measured him. I dragged myself behind a broken altar as Kong swatted one of them through a wall. The man vanished in a cloud of shattered stone. Another fired a line into a pillar and swung clear, not trying to kill Kong, only trying to hold position long enough to finish whatever reading they needed. That changed everything. The ruin was not just a tomb. It was a lock, and the tablet in my arms was not a map alone. Along its rim, where my blood had smeared into old carvings, new lines of light had awakened, matching the pattern that static net had traced across Kong's body. The intruders had not come here looking for treasure first. They came because this place needed two keys: Kong and me. For one terrible heartbeat, I understood why my family had hidden instead of ruling. The Forgotten Titan War had not ended with victory. It had ended with a seal. My bloodline kept one half dormant. A Titan of the old Protector line carried the other half without knowing it. The last intruder still standing saw the light in the tablet and understood too. He dropped his rifle, lunged for a control case at his belt, and slammed his palm onto it. Deep beneath the floor, something answered. Not a roar, not a quake, a machine heartbeat. The mosaic split down the center. Ancient gears screamed under layers of stone, and a massive ring began to rise from below, black metal fused with fossilized bone. The whole chamber tilted. Chunks of ceiling rained down. Kong turned from the intruders and caught a falling slab before it crushed me, but the save cost him. The orange symbol still ghosting across his fur flashed once on the ring below. Recognition. The lock had accepted him, and because I still held the tablet, it accepted me too. The fourth guardian woke. Its hand broke through the rising ring first. Not flesh, not fully machine, but something built in the image of a titan and armored for a war the world had forgotten. Bronze ribs covered a furnace core. Its skull was long and narrow, with no eyes, only a red seam of light that opened like a blade. 40 feet tall in the crouch, bigger if it stood, and every movement came with the grinding certainty of old purpose. It was not attacking at random. It was reaching for the tablet. The surviving intruders finally panicked. One ran for the stairwell. Another tried to reactivate the cable anchor. The last shouted for extraction into a comm unit that only spat static. They had opened a door they could not control. I had one choice left, and it was worse than losing the artifact. I stood. Stone dust rolled off my shoulders as I pushed myself upright, and the guardian turned its skull-like face toward me with a stare that felt older than memory. Blue lines burned through the cracks in its bronze armor. In one arm it carried a spear longer than a telephone pole, and in the other, a shield fused with gears and fossil bone. It did not see me as a man. It saw me as a key. I clutched the tablet against my chest and backed toward the broken archway. Then the floor shook again, not from the guardian, but from something far heavier landing beyond the chamber. Calm. The sound of him came first, a deep impact through stone, then the low warning rumble that made dust ripple in circles. The guardian shifted. Its attention split between the artifact in my hands and the titan in the doorway. For one suspended second, both of them seemed to recognize the same symbol carved across the chamber walls. Kong moved first, but not to attack. He slammed one fist into the floor between us. The impact shattered a ring of old tiles and dropped a curtain of debris between the panicked intruders and the tablet. He was hurting, dividing, thinking. The 6 intruders were no longer one threat. They were scattered prey inside a machine they did not understand. I understood just enough to make a worse decision. Come with me, I said, though I knew Kong did not follow orders. I held up the tablet, then pointed toward a collapsed side corridor where red mineral light leaked through cracks in the wall. The guardian stepped after us at once. Good. It wanted the relic. That meant it would lead us to whatever had once controlled it. Kong watched me for one hard second, chest heaving, then took the bait. He grabbed a fallen column and hurled it across the main hall, sealing off the intruders from our path. Their shouts vanished behind stone. For the first time since I had entered the ruin, the chamber was not a battleground. It was a trail. The corridor narrowed into a throat of black rock and hammered metal. Ancient murals climbed both walls, preserved beneath glassy mineral skin. Even in the dim red glow, I knew the shapes. Human figures in war masks stood beside Titans, not against them. Their weapons were not guns or bombs. They were tuning forks the size of obelisks, blades lined with resonant teeth, armor threaded with conduits that fed power from Titan blood into stone engines. My family had not left me stories. They had left me fragments. Prayers cut down to warnings. Names spoken only once, then buried. But here, the truth was still on the walls. We were not soldiers, I whispered, more to myself than to Kong. We were keepers. Kong slowed beside me. He glanced from the murals to the tablet, then to my face. There was no confusion in him. Only that strange, painful focus I had seen when he touched old places in hollow earth, as if ruins pressed on some wound inside him. The next chamber opened like a buried cathedral. Preserved weapons hung in racks taller than houses. Not rusted. Waiting. For empty cradles stood in a circle around a central dais, each shaped for one of the biomechanical guardians. 3 sigils glowed faintly. 1 pulsed bright. The construct behind us stopped at the threshold and lowered its spear. That was when I saw the carvings on the dais clearly enough to understand them. This was not an armory. It was a prison control chamber. I stepped onto the platform, brushing away centuries of grit with my sleeve. The symbols matched the tablet exactly. My hands shook as I set it into the center lock. The chamber answered with a deep metallic hum, and the murals beyond the dais lit in sequence, showing the last days of the war. Not a war between humans and Titans. A war against something both sides had failed to kill. The images were brutally simple. A winged shape blotted out the hollow earth sky. The mural light had barely finished crawling across the stone when the first engine whine cut through the chamber. I froze with my hand still on the tablet. That sound did not belong in these ruins. It was too sharp, too modern, too human. A second later, the floor beneath my boots gave a faint metallic tremor, not from the mural machinery, but from impacts above us. Fast, measured, closing in. Then Kong reacted. I felt the air shift before I heard him move. His head snapped toward the broken vault above, nostrils flaring, every muscle in his shoulders tightening at once. He was not looking at the mural anymore. He was looking past it, toward a threat I had spent years trying to outrun. The signal. I had muted every trace of my bloodline I could, hidden the tablet, buried the old pathways, disabled the waking pulses inside these dead war chambers. But by locking that tablet into the dais, I had completed something ancient, something loud, and now it had called more than Kong. A hard white beam slashed down through the opening overhead. Voices followed. 6 of them. Human. I backed away from the dais as dust rained from the ceiling. Black cables dropped first, then armored figures sliding down in practiced silence, helmets gleaming under the mural glow. Not explorers, not scientists, recovery hunters. Their rifles swept the room, pausing on the lit walls, the tablet, then me. One of them said, "Target confirmed." That was when the floor panels around the chamber split open. Bronze limbs punched through stone. For shapes rose from the trenches built into the ruin itself, each one as tall as a house, forged from ancient alloy and layered with fossilized armor plates. Their skulls looked almost Titan, but wrong in every detail, too precise, too manufactured. Empty eye sockets flashed alive with blue fire. The lines I had seen in the mural now burned across their bodies. The biomechanical guardians were waking. For 1 second, the intruders and I stared at them together. Then everything broke loose. The hunters opened fire first. Their rifles cracked in deafening bursts, rounds sparking off bronze chests. It did nothing except make the guardians turn. A bladed arm snapped sideways and cut one cable clean in half. Another guardian drove its fist into the stone, sending a shockwave through the dais that threw me off my feet. I hit the floor hard enough to lose my breath. The tablet skidded from the lock and spun across the platform. The chamber lights flickered red. Kong roared. I had seen him violent before. This was different. This was immediate, protective rage. He crashed into the nearest guardian before it could pin me beneath its descending claw. Bronze folded under the force of his shoulder. The two of them tore through a mural wall in an explosion of rock and sparks. The hunters were not here to save anyone. They shifted instantly, not toward the exit, but toward the fallen tablet. So I moved first. I lunged across the shaking floor and grabbed it just as one of them reached for me. He caught my wrist. I drove the edge of the tablet into the visor of his helmet. The glass starred. He reeled back, and I ran. Not away from Kong. Toward the old signal column at the far end of the chamber. If the ruins were reactivating, then the same pulse guiding the expedition was guiding the Guardians too. I could not fight 6 armed intruders or 4 war constructs, but I could cut the beacon. Behind me, Kong tore one Guardian's arm free and swung it like a club into another. Metal screamed. One hunter vanished under falling stone. Another fired a cable launcher into Kong's side, trying to anchor him long enough to get a clear shot at me. Kong ripped the line free, but the distraction cost him. A Guardian's tail blade raked across his ribs, opening a dark streak of blood through his fur. I reached the column and saw the truth at once. I had not reactivated a warning. Stone dust poured over my hands as the symbols inside the column shifted under my blood. The grooves were not alarm marks. They were directions. I saw it in one flash, as clearly as if someone had cut the battlefield open and laid its bones bare. The scars carved across the walls, the deep trenches in the black floor, even the broken spires jutting from the cavern rim were not random damage from some ancient massacre. They formed a path, a map written by titans in the only way creatures that size could write anything at all, with wounds, impact, and ruin. Behind me, metal slammed against stone. Kong roared, low and furious. One arm wrapped around a Guardian's neck while another rushed his bleeding side with its blade tail raised. He was buying me seconds he could not afford. I pressed both palms to the column and shouted the only thing I knew. Down! The floor answered before Kong did. A seam of pale blue light ripped through the battlefield in a line nearly 200 feet long. The ground split beneath the nearest Guardian, and that construct dropped into darkness as old gears woke below. Kong twisted at the last instant, dragging the one in his grip away from the opening. The second Guardian crashed into the edge and vanished after the first in a shower of sparks. The humans scattered, yelling over each other, their lights jerking wildly across the chamber. For one breath, everything changed. The battlefield was no longer a tomb. It was a machine. A circular section of stone beyond the broken statues sank and rotated, exposing a descending ramp hidden under centuries of ash. The murals along the walls glowed in sequence now, no longer dead carvings, but instructions. I did not need to read every symbol. I felt them. My family had carried these patterns in stories, in scarred diagrams inked onto skin, in warnings whispered over children too young to understand. I had thought they were rituals of grief. They were operating commands. Kong looked at me, chest heaving, blood running dark through his fur. I pointed toward the opening. He understood at once. He slammed the last Guardian into a cracked pillar, sent it staggering, then bounded toward me as the 6 intruders regrouped above us with rifles and cutting torches. I ran down the ramp, and Kong followed, each footfall shaking dust from the ceiling. Gunfire sparked off the walls behind us. One of the intruders shouted for the engine. So they knew that much. The vault at the bottom was enormous, but not in the way the battlefield was. That chamber had been made for war. This one had been made for memory. The ceiling curved like the inside of a buried skull. Murals wrapped around it in bands, showing titans tearing through forests, oceans boiling with bodies, and towers of bone set on fire beneath a red sky. In every image, one mark repeated, a crescent cut through by 3 lines. The same mark was burned into the skin below my collarbone. I stopped breathing for a second. At the center of the vault stood a sealed engine the size of a house, built from black stone and a metal that looked half-grown, half-forged. Tubes like fossilized arteries ran from it into the walls. 4 empty sockets ringed its base, each shaped to receive the heads of the Guardians above. Dormant defense constructs. Not soldiers. Keys. Kong stepped in front of me when the first intruder reached the floor. He did not charge. He held his ground, huge and silent, blocking the engine with his body while I stared at the mural nearest the base. There, at last, was the truth. The war had not ended because one side won. It ended because my bloodline betrayed its own purpose. The survivors had sealed this engine and erased themselves from history because it was not a weapon against titans. It was a call, a summoning mechanism. Stone dust drifted through the chamber like gray snow, and for a few seconds I could hear nothing except the engine waking beneath us. The sound was wrong. Not mechanical, not natural. It was too deep for either, like something answering from very far away. My hands were still on the mural when I felt the floor shiver again. Cracks of pale blue light spread through the black stone around the sealed ring. Behind me, the 6 intruders had finally reached the lower platform, boots scraping, weapons raised, breath ragged from the descent. But none of them fired. They were staring at the same thing I was. The engine was opening. I turned toward Kong. He stood between all of us and the widening circle in the floor, shoulders hunched, one massive hand planted against a fallen pillar to steady himself as the chamber trembled. His eyes were fixed on me, not on the humans behind me, and in that look I felt something that cut deeper than fear. He understood this place before I did. "It's not a weapon," I said, though my voice nearly vanished under the rising hum. "My family sealed it because it calls something here." One of the intruders shouted for me to move. Another yelled that we had found the core and needed extraction. Their panic made them loud. Kong's answer was silence. He struck the stone once with his fist, and the whole platform jumped under our feet. It was not a warning to attack. It was a warning to stop. I should have listened with him. Instead, I stepped closer to the engine. The mural had already given me one truth, but now the widening gap exposed another. Beneath the stone shell sat a lattice of old metal and fossil bone, fused together around a central column of amber light. Human hands had built part of it. Titan remains had completed it. My bloodline had not just hidden a signal. We had fed it with the dead. A wave of sickness hit me so hard I had to grab the wall. That was the real inheritance. Not guardianship. Not sacred duty. Guilt. The chamber shook harder. Pieces of the ceiling began to fall. One slab smashed into the walkway behind the intruders, cutting off their retreat in a burst of sparks and dust. Their leader swung his rifle toward me and screamed for the others to secure the chamber before it collapsed. This time their fear turned them reckless. Kong moved first. He slammed both fists into the floor between them and the engine, splitting the stone in a jagged trench. 2 intruders lost their footing and went down hard. A third fired anyway. The shot hit Kong high in the shoulder. He roared, not in pain alone, but in fury that these tiny creatures still did not understand what was waking under them. Then he did something that stopped me cold. He reached past the engine and tore a slab from the mural wall instead of destroying the core. He was trying to save the record. I had spent my whole life chasing the truth buried by my family, and in that instant I wanted to erase it with my own hands. If this knowledge survived, more expeditions would come. More engines would be sought. More things buried by the old war would be dragged back into the light. Truth would not free us. Truth would summon the next disaster. "No," I shouted, and this time I was the one who moved first. I ran to the exposed column, ignoring the heat blistering through my gloves, and pulled the relic blade from my pack. The same blade that had opened the lower seals in the temple was narrow enough to fit between the glowing ribs of the core. If I broke the center, maybe I could kill the signal before it finished. Kong saw what I meant to do. He lunged, not to hurt me, but to stop me. His hand crashed down in front of me, blocking the core. The impact of that hand stopped more than my body. It stopped the choice I was about to make. Heat rolled off the exposed core in waves, turning the air white with steam. My gloves were already smoking. The relic blade shook in my grip, but Kong's palm stayed between me and the glowing chamber, huge, steady, unmoving. For one furious second, I thought he was protecting the thing that had nearly turned him into a weapon. Then the floor beneath us split open. The chamber gave a long, metallic groan, and the entire broken platform began to sink like an elevator dropping into the dark. Kong pulled his hand back just enough to keep balance. I stumbled, nearly losing the blade, and the core's light poured down through widening cracks below us. This wasn't a reactor. It was a lock. I looked up at him through the smoke, and he was not staring at the machine. He was staring at me. The platform descended through layers of buried architecture, each one older than the last. Collapsed balconies. Titan-sized doors fused shut by ancient heat. Walls covered in carved battle scenes where giant figures drove blades into the throats of things that did not look like titans at all, but machines wearing titan shapes. Far below, a circular vault opened beneath us, almost half a mile wide, its center occupied by a black stone dais wrapped in dead cables thicker than train cars. The instant we touched down, every wall around the vault came alive. Light ran through symbols cut into the stone. A voice filled the chamber, not from one speaker, but from everywhere at once. Old, calm, inhuman. At last, it said, the bloodline returns to the final gate. My stomach dropped harder than the platform had. Kong bared his teeth and pounded his chest once, the sound cracking across the chamber like thunder. He was ready for an enemy he could hit. I wasn't. The black dais in the center unfolded in layers, and a shape rose from inside it. Not a body, not exactly. It was a crown-like lattice of metal and fossilized bone suspended around a column of amber light. Faces flickered in that light, human faces, then titan skulls, then battle maps, then burning cities. A memory engine, a surviving mind. I am the last command will of the war, it said. I endured when kings failed. All at once, everything that had followed us through the ruins made sense. The 4 biomechanical guardians had not been defending treasure. They had been protecting this chamber. The signal in the sky, the seals, the false awakenings, the way the relic blade fit every lock I had touched. None of it was random. You made us, I whispered. The light sharpened. Your line was designed, not born. Human flesh. Titan resonance. Obedience coded through blood. The final lock cannot open to force. It opens to lineage. My throat tightened so hard I could barely breathe. My family had not guarded this place by oath. We had been built for it. Kong stepped between me and the dais, lowering himself, one hand spread wide as if he could shield me from a truth. The command will answered by igniting the chamber walls. Above us, stone plates rotated open, exposing the buried mechanisms of the gate. Far overhead, I heard it again, that impossible storm in the hollow earth sky, louder now, closer. The hostile force approaches, the voice said. Release the gate, and the war may be resumed under proper command. That was the direct threat, not just old history, a living plan. Something out there had answered the signal, and this intelligence wanted me to let it in. Kong didn't wait. He moved first. With a roar that shook dust from the ceiling, he tore a slab of black stone from the floor and hurled it into the floating crown. The impact shattered half the lattice, but the amber column stayed intact. In response, the chamber struck back without bodies. Rings of energy locked around Kong's wrists and throat, slamming him to one knee. Blue fire raced through the carved channels in the floor, and the whole chamber came alive like a heart restarting after 10,000 years. The rings around Kong's wrists tightened until stone cracked under his hands. A second ring cinched his throat, forcing his roar into a ragged, furious grind that shook my ribs. Then the amber column pulsed once, and the answer hidden inside it spread far beyond the chamber. I felt it in my teeth first. Then the island moved. A deep impact rolled up from somewhere under us, so heavy it made the ceiling dust fall in sheets. Another hit followed, then another. Not footsteps, not an earthquake. Something buried was forcing its way upward through layer after layer of ancient rock, responding to the same command that had trapped Kong. The 4 biomechanical guardians around the vault changed all at once. Their dead metal ribs split open, spilling bands of red light instead of amber. Their heads turned away from me and toward the outer tunnels, as if a higher priority had just overwritten the old one. Defense mode had become war mode. And outside, the 6 intruders finally got what they came for. Their cutting torches flashed in the corridor. I heard boots, shouted orders, gun safeties snapping off. They had followed the signal down and walked straight into the grave of a war they did not understand. One of them saw the chamber ignite and yelled in triumph. That triumph lasted maybe 3 seconds. The nearest guardian drove a spear arm through him so fast his body hit the wall before the sound reached me. The others opened fire. Muzzle flashes stuttered blue and white across the darkness. Bullets sparked off ancient alloy, useless. The vault became a storm of ricochets, screams, and waking machinery. Kong did not wait for rescue. He planted one hand against the floor, took the full force of the restraint field, and pulled. Muscles swelled across his shoulders. Blood ran down his forearms where the energy bands bit deep. The black stone under his knees shattered in a spiderweb pattern. He was not just fighting to stand. He was holding the chamber in place. Every time the island heaved, another fracture split through the walls, and beyond those cracks I could see vertical shafts glowing red, rising from deeper levels like veins feeding a monster. That was when I understood what the old records had meant. The war had never really ended. My people had not built this place only to imprison enemies. They had built it to keep one enemy asleep beneath the island and to let the defense network erase every trace if the prison was ever compromised. The signal I had answered was not a welcome. It was the last stage of a kill command. More impacts boomed below us. The floor buckled. A ridge of armored black mass punched up through the far side of the chamber, showering us with molten stone. It was not fully free yet, but I saw enough. A colossal spine, plates like fused obsidian, heat moving through seams in the armor like lava through cracked earth. Something ancient was climbing back into the world, and the chamber was waking everything it had left to stop it. One of the intruders ran for the amber column. Greed beat fear for one fatal second. A guardian seized him, slammed him into the console ring, and his blood sprayed across symbols I had only seen in my family's sealed maps. The symbols changed. A final command line opened in light across the stone. Only lineage can close the war. I knew what it meant before I touched it. If I triggered it, the network would burn out its archive, collapse the signal lattice, and wipe the last intact record of my people's existence. Every name, every map, every proof that we had stood here and held the line once before. The world would survive, and my bloodline would vanish with the system that carried it. Another shock threw me against the column. Another shock threw me against the column. Dust rained down in glowing sheets. The buried battlefield around us was coming apart exactly the way the old makers had designed it to. Not as a weapon, as a grave. I could feel the lattice under my palm, pulsing through the stone like a dying heartbeat. If I finished the sequence, the archive of my bloodline would burn away forever. The war would end here. So would the last proof that we had ever survived it. I looked up at Kong. He was still on one knee in the collapsing chamber, chest heaving, one arm slick with dark blood where one of the biomechanical guardians had torn through muscle and hide. Above us, the final guardian hung broken across a split bridge, its metal spine sparking blue into the dark. Beyond it, the hostile recovery expedition was finished. Their greed had carried them into the heart of the old system, and the system had answered. Nothing moved out there now except drifting ash and falling stone. Kong turned his head toward me, and in that terrible noise, I understood him with perfect clarity. Not the war. Me. For my whole life, my blood had been treated like a key, a claim, a permission code left behind by dead people with unfinished business. Even here, at the end of everything, the city beneath the earth still wanted to turn me into a function. A final command. A last obedient survivor. I took my hand off the stone. The lattice flared hard enough to blind me. Deep in the chamber, hidden locks began to open. The whole place shuddered as if something larger than the city itself had taken a breath. I had chosen wrong. Then Kong moved. He did not charge the enemy. There was no enemy left to beat. Instead, he drove both fists into the floor between me and the column. The impact cracked the ancient platform in a widening ring. Whole slabs dropped away into the abyss below, dragging the base of the archive's spindle off center. The glowing channels in the stone snapped out of alignment. The sequence broke. Every light in the chamber flickered at once. The pulse beneath my feet stumbled, then changed. What had been a firing pattern became a collapse pattern. The network was no longer trying to preserve itself or complete the purge. It was caving inward, burying its own core. Kong had done what none of my ancestors could. He had not finished the war. He had refused to let it choose for us. The tower above us began to fall. I ran. Not away from Kong. Toward him. A beam the size of a freight car tore loose from the ceiling. Kong caught it across his shoulders with a roar that shook dust from the black air. His legs buckled. The floor under him sank another 10 feet. He was holding up a dead civilization with the last strength left in him. I reached the split column, slammed my palm against the exposed seam, and found one final live seam in the ruined controls. The system still recognized my blood, but now I was not obeying it. I was redirecting it. Close. I whispered, though there was no one left alive to hear it but me. The old gates at the edge of the chamber dropped all at once. Walls folded inward. Stone and metal cascaded through the arena where the war records had been stored for centuries. Names, maps, trophies, commands. All of it disappeared under thousands of tons of collapsing rock. Not erased in service of the past. Buried beyond use. The pressure on the beam above Kong suddenly shifted. He threw the broken mass aside, lunged forward, and scooped me up just as the platform split down the middle. We fell together into the smoke and red light. Then his free hand found the cliff. For one endless second, I hung against his chest over a drop so deep it swallowed sound. Below us, the archive chamber imploded.